It's a currency of the elite, right? When you have more money than you know what to do with, and that you'll ever spend in any lifetime, your fetishes just get weirder and weirder. The depravity is the part that people don't really understand how bad it really, really is. They have so much money that they can basically whitewash everything that they need to whitewash and keep it under wraps. But you're right, it's the ultimate form of control.
Traveling to a restrictive country with internet censorship? A VPN is the answer. And surf the internet with no restrictions.
When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes a duty. So said Thomas Jefferson. Go to bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make war history and find out why it is a criminal offence to pay central government or local government taxes in the UK. bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make war history. And let's make war history. I'm going to give a warning for people watching this video. We are going to talk about something that is repulsive and sickening. You listen to this conversation at your own risk.
Whatever you're in.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much for making yourself available. We finally get to speak.
I know it's been hit and miss for like 2 weeks trying to get this scheduled. So
that's right. And I've been on holiday and you've had stuff on and all of that.
Oh. I was gone, then you were gone, then I was gone, then you were gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you said something about the recent video I recorded with EM Burlingham where we looked at how trauma plays out.
Yeah. So EM and I are in the same, we have a chat that we're in together. And so I get to talk to him, all the time. So I get to see a lot of his posts on Twitter and, he's like Tom Malonga, right? He's a deep thinker. And I like the way he's like, Bracken's the same way, right? Bracken's a deep thinker too. And they'll take something all the way to the end of a thought process, which is great for when you got a room full of alpha males, because everybody stops and pauses and goes, okay, yeah, I didn't consider that. So, sorry. Anyway, where I was going with that is an interesting interview. And I think we're seeing a lot of that play out on the national stage right now when it comes to, I don't want to just say trauma, but trauma is an interesting word for that.
So you and I, we've talked about this before when we talked about child trafficking and how it leads to sociopathic and psychopathic, damaged children becoming damaged adults doing damage to other people. And I can definitely see that with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I have no idea what happened to him in his childhood. No idea. There are pictures. He was of him with Jimmy Savile. Who knows what happened there? But the man has no empathy. And he tells bare-faced lies, sitting with Trump and J.D. Vance, and then again with Trump saying, oh, we have freedom of speech. By the way, for those watching, get a VPN, especially if in the UK while they're still legal. Yeah.
So, yeah, we did talk about this before, right? One of the things that they do in those circles, and again, this is you're in the Child Protective Services world, so you know exactly what I'm about to say. But a lot of people don't understand how it's a system of abuse that has been perfected over generations. So these kids go through. They get trafficked, and then they get ritually and ritualistically abused. So they become abusers, and literally, they're so young that they don't know what normal is.
Yeah.
So they're taught a new normal by all this ritualistic abuse, and so when they get older, they have no concept of what normal is. They can function like the rest of us, but they don't have a moral compass. They've never been shown what right and wrong looks like. So it's all mixed together for them. And so when you see somebody like Macron, Justin Trudeau, and even Starmer, they've been abused they were abused so much as kids that they don't. There's no moral compass to say lying is wrong or changing the rules is wrong. I mean, in California this week, this is how you tell that a lot of these blue states are run by pedophiles. California just signed into law a law which allows anyone to go to a school and sign your kid out and walk away with your kid. And the school has no.
No, that can't be so.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if it was signed into law last week or the week before, but it was signed into law. that anybody could go to a school, sign your kid out, and walk away with your kid, and the school has no obligation to tell you. Washington State, they passed a law where your kid can be serialistically abused, if that's a word, ritually abused or sexually molested, and the school has no obligation to tell you. They put that into law. That's it's and I talked about this like 6, 7 years ago when I got into the child trafficking thing. It was really just to do an assessment. It was to go and tell the command, and it was a 3-star at the time, how bad it is. And it was basically, I was brought into his office and he says, I need to understand how bad this pedophilia thing is. Here's some resources, go figure this out. And so, it took several months to do it. But on the other side of it, we realized that was every institution in our society is compromised by this. And people don't realize how big of an issue this is, and that, ritualistic abuse of children is, I mean, it's exploded since Biden came to office in 2020. Literally, we went from 40,000 kids a year that went missing to 400,000. And they were being openly trafficked across the border, taken to airports, put on planes, and transferred to all parts of the U.S. via plane. Somebody had to pay for the plane. Somebody had to pay for the kids to move from place to place. Where'd the money come from? And you notice how, since all the Epstein disclosure has come out, there's been no discussion of that. It's just Trump has ordered DHS to go find the kids. Okay, why don't we understand who was funding the operation and why? And then tell the public what was going on and why. And I did a show talking about the Epstein problem, and I got a lot of blowback from it because people don't realize that it's not just the list, right? Everybody's focused on who were the perpetrators. You have to boil it up to who funded the operation, who covered for the operation. The CIA knew about it. If they weren't actively involved, they at least knew about it, which means a bunch of people in the CIA, the FBI, and before DHS, because this goes back way before DHS. DHS was created, Department of Homeland Security was created after 9/11. So it's a new organization. So is DNI. So it means that the FBI and the CIA and probably NSA knew that this was going on, and they did nothing about it, which means you have directors from all the way back to the 80s and 90s when Epstein was put in place that knew the operation was going on and covered for it. And then there's all the minions around the New York Police Department, the FBI field offices. All of those people knew about it too. So you're talking about a large body of people that were involved in covering it up and keeping it under wraps. So then you start looking at the bigger picture around how many victims.
I would add that Mossad knew. I'm speculating here, and MI6 would have known. CIA were in.
I assume that Mossad ran the op with MI6 in either directing or in concert with MI6. That's my assumption, based on everything I've seen, everything I've heard. And if you go back to, so Ann Coulter was the first one that really followed the Epstein story and ran it to ground. She's the one that broke the news that Acosta, the first attorney general that prosecuted him in 2000, I think it was 2008, 2009, when he was first prosecuted. He was the one that came out and said, yeah, I was told he's an intelligence asset and I have to leave him alone. Okay, right there, that tells you everything you need to know. It tells you all the intelligence services were involved. And it doesn't even have to be true, because somebody had to run the operation and somebody had to finance the operation. And we're talking about a tremendous sum of money that he was basically given. And where'd the money come from, right? Nobody's asking that question, really, where the money came from. They are now, but they weren't at the time. The other thing people aren't asking is, what do you do with all the victims? Because you're talking about thousands of victims, thousands that have been taken to the island. They were abused. A lot of them have been killed. A lot of them have been silenced. But you can't just look at it and say, okay, well, they're victims and we'll let them go. If they've been in the system, because it's a system that was set up, decades ago to abuse children. And everybody thinks I'm crazy when I say what I'm about to say, and that is, the elite are addicted to children. They're addicted to them, and it's not. I don't know anything about the adrenochrome stuff, right? I keep seeing stuff about adrenochrome. I never saw that in the stuff that I did. I never heard about that. That was never a thing. The things I saw was rape, torture, and dismemberment of children. That's what I saw, and they were all children under 10. They weren't teenagers. The teenagers were more for sexual gratification, but it was the younger kids that were for organ harvesting and all the other things. And I didn't see a lot of the organ harvesting. I did see some of it, but what I mainly saw was the rape and torture of kids. And it's a currency of the elite, right? When you have more money than you know what to do with, and that you'll ever spend in any lifetime, your your fetishes just get weirder and weirder and weirder, right? And the depravity is the part that people don't really understand how bad it really really is. And I've talked about red rooms before and how disgusting red rooms are, and they're all over the planet. People think that Epstein was the only island. It's not. There's other islands, there's other operations. Child trafficking is a global industry. It's the biggest cash and carry business on the planet. It's the thing that most people take for granted. And it kills me when somebody says, well, the pedophilia thing's not that big of a problem. Yes, it is. It's a huge problem. And it's a huge problem because most of the people that are around Macron, and this came out, go watch the Candace Owens interview with Tucker Carlson. If you think I'm crazy, go listen to that interview. It'll validate everything that I've been saying for the last 10 years. And that is, everybody around Macron is a pedophile. They've been put in key positions in the French government. What do you think's going on in the rest of Europe and in the EU and in Britain? If Starmer was a protege of Jimmy Savile, one of the most, the worst pedophiles in UK history, what do you think is surrounding him? Probably more pedophiles.
Well, his was an MI5 operation, the British equivalent of Epstein. And Stephen, if I can just go back a little, for people watching this, Stephen used to work in military intelligence, and a red room is where people will zoom in on the dark web somewhere, and they give instructions about what needs to be done to the child and the adult by the adult that they're watching. It's despicable. And then I would just add, it is the ultimate form of control using children, because people confess up to being alcoholics. They confess up to being, that they're recovering alcoholics or drug addicts or gamblers or whatever. Nobody can ever fess up that they did something to an underage kid, to a minor. They're owned forever. Human beings are nasty. I see their nastiness within families. So doing nastiness outside of families is a piece of cake. And the thing you said earlier about when you've got so much money that you can really indulge in your fetishes. So one is, I think people live inside this illusion that once I have so much money, like once I'm a multimillionaire, once I'm a multi-billionaire, then I'll be happy. No, because it's the same person, just with a bigger bank balance. And then that illusion gets punctured. I've still got my same weaknesses and flaws and strengths and everything, but I got all this money and I'm dissatisfied. Well, let me see if this particular pursuit can help me deal with that, because the drugs ain't doing it. The loads of women ain't doing it.
Yeah. And you add to it, when you have that much money, you can basically buy anybody off.
Yeah.
So you're basically unaccountable, which is, if look at Bill Gates, how is the guy still walking around? I mean, the Gates Foundation, their malfeasance. I mean, you could go down the numbers on all of the different RICO charges, but because he has so much money, he basically buys his freedom from all the politicians and all of the people in power. So that's how they get around it, is they have so much money that they can basically, whitewash everything that they need to whitewash and keep it under wraps. But you're right, it's the ultimate form of control, because nobody wants to admit that they had sex with a child, or they dismembered a child, or were, killed a child, which some of these perpetrators have, right? Some of these people that went to the island, they did it all. And it's names that it's people that are famous. It's people that are in key positions of power. I mean, one of the revelations that I saw personally that blew my mind, even to this day, and I've been around this stuff since 2008, 2009. It was when I got introduced to it, and I had to, go figure out how bad it was. I saw names. I saw names on lists that were people that are everyday names in Hollywood. I saw university professors. I saw, people that were in charge of these huge NGOs, people in charge of these huge political action groups, politicians, you name it. I saw the full gamut of names. And, one of those names on there was somebody that I knew personally, and I was blown away. And it was somebody that had been in the island repeatedly. And I had no idea that he was even involved in that. And to this day, I don't think his name's ever been put in the public eye, to this day. my point of saying all that is when your conversation about trauma and why that's such an issue and why it's so important is we're rapidly approaching a culmination point with all of this revelation around the pedophilia piece and the blackmail operations, where that disclosure is going to tip over the public consciousness. And what's going to tip it over is when people realize that it's way worse than what we're being told happened with Epstein, and that was just tip of the iceberg. I mean, some of the genetic experiments he was working on, some of the other experiments he was working on with pharmaceuticals and chemicals.
Yeah.
It's very, very dark and very insidious, and people don't realize it. And you can talk about it all you want, but the proof hasn't made it to the public space. And I hate to say it for Trump, but he's created an existential crisis for himself because the Epstein stuff is not going away.
Yeah, I'll come to that in a second, Stephen. Ex-MP Andrew Bridgen, ex-Conservative MP and then Independent MP Andrew Bridgen, who's been a warrior for freedom. He was a biomedical graduate, had the injections, got hurt by the injections, and then was a brave soul that spoke out. And they rigged his re-election, completely rigged it so that he's no longer in Parliament. He recently posted a video, a documentary about the child trafficking and the organ harvesting in Ukraine. Now, of course, the mainstream media is not going to touch that because they're all complicit in the lie of that has underscored that war and the cover-up of that war, the bioweapons labs, like I said, the child trafficking and the organ harvesting. So I think there's going to come a point where it is all going to come out. It all's going to come out and people are going to be nauseated. They're going to be sickened. They're going to throw up by the stuff that emerge. And then,
well, I think it's going to come out of one of the victims or somebody on the inside that has had to keep their silence for years. I thought somebody in the FBI would have done it years ago, right? Because there was a lot of good people in the FBI that looked at that evidence, not just from the Wiener laptop, but the evidence that came out of the island and went, wait a minute, this is above and beyond. And it really is a testament to just how effective the threat is for people that are involved, to where they've been able to keep it under wraps for this long. I mean, Epstein was first rolled up in 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And that stretched into 2011. And it only came out because of Ann Coulter and a few other journalists that were following it. And now the reason why it's out is because of the Q movement. So you can make fun of the Q movement all you want. But the one thing that, and I've said this before, the one byproduct of the whole Q phenomenon is the fact that people did deep research on the links between the NGOs, the public-private partnerships, the companies, and all the interlaced companies across the planet, and how it's a very incestuous market and how things are manipulated. They uncovered all of this. They are the ones that brought this to the forefront and made the press talk about it. Now, all we need is somebody to tip over with some evidence that shows somebody really famous having sex with a kid or torturing a kid, and guess what? It's game on. And I think that nudge is coming, because look at the other proof in the pudding is they are racing to put this control grid in place that, they're using Palantir and all these other intelligence-based companies to build this. I don't even know if I could call it a social scoring system. It's just a control grid. And they are racing to get it in place by the end of the year. Why? I mean, what is it that they're expecting by the end of the year that they need to completely control the entire population of the planet? I mean, really, what are they expecting? And it's not UFOs, it's not aliens, it's not this spacecraft or whatever they're saying is coming into our solar system, which I think is a bunch of hooey anyway. I think at the end of the day, they know some kind of disclosure is coming, and they're trying their best to lock it down so they can keep control of the situation.
Yeah,
that sure is what it looks like.
Yep. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm going to posit something, not the absolute truth, right? And then we'll go to Trump and what you were saying, which is, I think there's stuff that's happening in terms of astrology that's going to be impacting us, because that's a point of view that I pay attention to see how it maps out. And I actually think it's a forgotten hidden science, in particular Vedic astrology, because it's so damn old through thousands of years of empirical observations. Now, I may be wrong. This may be too woo-woo for you, Stephen, for other people watching, but
No, not really. I have a numerologist friend that I talk to all the time.
Yeah, let's see how it plays out.
Yeah, she has said that, we're entering a turbulent time, and that the time period we're in is very reminiscent. It's actually in the stars are in the exact same alignment as they were in 1770, 74, 75, and 76. And we're entering the same kind of turbulence. And look, everybody outside the US that's not a Christian looks at astrology and takes it in for what it is, because there is something to it. It's only the Christian faiths that have been basically told it's witchcraft, right? If you use astrology the right way, you can tell a lot about yourself, your personality, et cetera. And like, I had her do just a profile read of me, and she had me by the numbers, like
Wow.
by the numbers, right? So there's something to it. But the other side of it too is our enemy, the elite. They use the dark side of numerology and astrology to plan their events and to plan their ritualistic behavior, right? If you look at the dates for a lot of these different major attacks, they all happen on satanic dates.
Yep. And stuff happens around the eclipses and around full moons and new moons, and millionaires don't use astrology. Billionaires do, the saying goes. Okay.
Yeah.
Now back to Trump. What were you saying?
Okay.
You're saying he's created an existential crisis for himself.
Well, he's created an existential crisis for himself because number one, he's doubled down on Israel. Number two, he said that he's switched positions on Epstein 4 times now. Don't release release the evidence, don't release the evidence, release the evidence, don't release the evidence. And so now he's starting to lose his base. And look, your audience is going to disagree with me. That's fine. It's just my opinion. But I think, and I should preface this with, I don't care who the renter in the White House is. I never did. And I never will, because I know how that whole situation works. The president signs things that are put in front of him. Most of the time, he never reads it because he doesn't have time. He's shuffled from meeting to meeting by handlers. He has people to make all the decisions for him, even what he's going to eat. And he's got a parade of assholes in and out of his office all day long when he's not on the road show doing, diplomacy, which is a loose word for what the president does. So the president's not really in charge of anything. And you can make the case that, oh yeah, he's the most powerful guy in the free world, whatever. My experience is that's not how the game's play. So whoever's around Trump is the one that's telling him we need to double down on this, or we need to get away from this and step away from this. I imagine it's Susie Wiles, and she's a globalist anyway, and she needs to go anyway. But because of the fact he's switched positions, his base has dug their heels in now, and they're not going to let go of the Epstein thing until the list of names is released and the evidence is released and the tapes are released. And look, would you release the tapes of the little kids being raped, tortured, dismembered? No, because it's fucking plutonium, right? You're not going to let that out. But a flight manifest doesn't really mean a lot. And that's the other thing that people get wrapped around the axle on, right? Trump could have been on his plane 100 times. That's how it works in those circles, right? When your plane breaks down, you jump on somebody else's plane. If they're going to the same place, and you catch a ride back with somebody else, that's how it goes in that strata. You just interact with people, and you do your cordial relationship, but doesn't mean he's going to the island, right? And people are wrapped around in that. Where the rubber meets the road is, who do they have hard evidence on? Who do they have tapes on? That's the list that people want to see. That's the list that needs to come out. But it pales in importance to who was running the op. And if it was Israel running the op and MI6, that's an act of war. That's literally an act of war. And so that's the list that people need to be demanding, not, there's a simple solution for the people that were frequent flyers to the island. You walk them outside, you put a bullet in their head, and you move on. You put their name on a list and put it on the wall of shame. All these guys are pedophiles, problem solved. Why waste a bunch of money on trials when if you got them on tape having sex with kids, bam, trial over. You're guilty. You're done. And that's what everybody wants to see. They want to see these big show trials. I don't want to see that. I want to see the people that were funding the operation brought to light. I want to see the intelligence services that were behind it brought to light. And I want to see the handlers and the operatives from the intelligence services outed and then brought to justice. And if we don't outright go to war with whoever was behind this, we should. At the minimum, we should tactically nuke their capital city, because this has been going on for 40 years. And if you think that I'm being draconian about this, think about all the dirt that they have on all of our politicians. And none of them get a free pass either. Like I said, if they were frequent flyers and went to the island, because there's 3 groups of people here. There's those that voluntarily signed up to be pedophiles. There's those that were coerced into it and those that were bribed outright, right? Some people never went to the island. They were just bribed. All those people need to be rolled up, right? The ones that were coerced into it, if you just did it once, they coerced you and you didn't know what was going on or you didn't know the kid was underage. Okay, we'll look at that in a court of law. We'll give you your day in court. But all the rest of you, frequent flyers that went to the island or took the money, you're done. Problem solved. Done. And we need a repeat of Nuremberg is what we really need. Here's all the shit you did. Here's all the shitheads that did it. Walk them outside and execute them.
Yep.
Really.
We definitely need that for this and also for that whole C-19 episode. We need Nuremberg for that. Now, just on the Epstein files and the intelligence services, I read an article by Hardy Schlanger from the LaRouche organization, absolutely brilliant article, and I've posted it to the video that I recorded with him and Alex recently. And he goes through a timeline of the whole Russiagate thing and what happened. And essentially it started with MI6 in the beginning. It's an MI6 operation from the beginning, spanning several years, that they fabricated this entire edifice built on lies in order to take down Trump. And the thing that it tells me is how desperate they were to get rid of Trump. And that given Biden's had the Epstein documents for, I don't know how many, 3-4 years or whatever, it's entirely possible, I'm not saying this happened, that they would have doctored the materials in order to make it look like Trump was involved in some way. Trump
Absolutely.
Was yeah,
absolutely. That's how the game's played. You just taint everything, so nobody knows what to believe. So then, even if there's people that are guilty on the, that are in the files, that it's so tainted. You look at it, and that's why Trump said it's all a hoax, because he doesn't know what's true and what's not true. Right? Okay, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, but the tapes will tell you who participated, who was there multiple times. They have the tapes. And when Pam Bondi says there's, thousands of tapes of kids being, raped and tortured, hello, she wasn't just talking about some rape porn that Epstein had. She's talking about people in the system that went to the island multiple times and did all these things. Yeah. Those are the people who need to be outed. The rest of it, did they taint the evidence? Absolutely. Because remember, they've had this evidence since 2007, 2008, when he was first rolled up. So imagine how many times that's either changed hands have touched it. People have been in the records to see what's there, to see who's there. Maybe they took it and used it as their own blackmail ops, which is widely believed. I mean, there's a multitude of scenarios where all of that evidence could have been tainted. Things could have been added to it. Things could have been planted. Things could have been deleted. We'll never know. We'll just never know.
Well,
that's the unfortunate.
I do think that stuff is going to get leaked out. I do think more is going to come out about this conversation. And there's another aspect to it that gets very little coverage. Or one of the things that makes me suspicious is how much is like the Guardian, which is such an establishment mouthpiece. They've stopped covering Russiagate, stopped covering it completely after Tulsi Gabbard demonstrated that Obama was lying, that he wasn't involved and stuff, right, by producing the receipts. But every Trump article mentions how he won't release the Epstein thing. So they won't talk about Obamagate or Russiagate, but they'll talk about this. So then that makes me kind of suspicious that it's being played to attack Trump. It's also served to split the base, the GOP base. And the aspect that doesn't get talked about is the money laundering, and not the wealth that this former math teacher accrued, but the money that they generated and created to fund this whole globalist Great Reset enterprise. You want to say something about that, please?
Well, money laundering was the basis of it, right? It wasn't the blackmail ops that was the primary goal. The primary goal was to fund other clandestine operations that were off the books, and this is a perfect way to do it. That's what Iran-Contra was about. People think that Oliver North was the only guy that was involved in Iran-Contra. He had to buy the arms from somebody. He had to have somebody move the arms. Then he had to pay people on the other end to take the arms and to move the drugs and everything else to be able to cover the shipments, et cetera. And when you start looking at the bigger logistical picture, yeah, it was all about money laundering, which means all of Wall Street was involved. Most of the big banks were involved. Most of the Wall Street bankers were involved. And, Morgan Stanley was the primary beneficiary.
JP Morgan?
JP Morgan was the primary beneficiary for a lot of money laundering operations. And they have ties to the CIA and so many illicit organizations. That's one of the other um, disclosures I think is coming out is where the money went and how the money was laundered. I think people are going to be astonished at all the different things that they were doing with all the illicit funds. Because, like I said, child trafficking is and human trafficking is one of the biggest cash carry businesses on the planet. It is the biggest. It's bigger than any drugs like fentanyl and cocaine and marijuana. They pale in comparison for the demand for children, and it's it's a problem that this generation, we have to solve. We have to solve this. And really, what it's going to come down to is not the perpetrators or the people organizing. It's going to come down to what do we do with the victims?
Yeah.
Because you have people that will never be able to function in society. And is it fair to them to put them in an institution for the rest of their lives because we can't figure out a way to help them back to normalcy? I mean, you're talking about kids that were abused from the time they were little kids until they were adults. So they have no concept of reality. They have no moral compass. They have no way to differentiate between right and wrong. Right and wrong. Are we supposed to penalize them because they were put into a system that they didn't have any control over? And nobody's even talking about that. Like, what do you do to help them? Because that, to me, that's the biggest thing that we need to see out of this, especially as a race of beings, is we have to have a ton of empathy for the people that were the kids that are now adults and the kids that are still in the system and kids that were, pushed through the system and thrown out the other side. Yeah, and you can make the case that Starmer is one of those kids, right? What do you do with him? And there's going to be kids that come through the system that don't ever reoffend and don't perpetrate. And then there's kids like Starmer that come through the system, they're put into key positions and they reoffend and they commit treason and all kinds. Those people need to be dealt with the right way, right, through the legal system. But I'm talking about a body of victims that never got counseling. They were never, shown any grace or empathy for what they went through. Most of them were shunned and denied any kind of reality that, yeah, this really happened to you. They were called crazy. I mean, that's something we have to solve because there's thousands of them, not just one or two. There's thousands of them across the planet. And if we want to break this cycle of and pattern of abuse, then we're going to have to put some really, really big institutions in place that are beneficial to all of those victims to help rehabilitate them. Otherwise, we're going to go through this in another 20, 30 years, just all over again.
And Stephen, something needs to happen before all of that. And it's something that I have to deal with as well myself, despite the work I do as child protection social worker, which is I got to be willing to look at it. I got to be willing to consider it. It's unpalatable. It's unpleasant. I don't want it to be going on. I don't want to find it. You don't want to look for it. It's so sickening. But unless I'm willing to confront that it goes on, I got no say about it. And it will just go on. So unless we're willing to confront our own humanity and our own revulsion for the sake of those victims, it ain't going to stop.
No, it won't. And it will be the hard part about the disclosure piece of this, right, is getting people to look at it, is that some of this stuff is so evil and so bad that just seeing it affects your psyche, right? You like look at the I think it was 7 New York police officers that killed themselves. At least 5 of them killed themselves after they saw the Epstein stuff. I mean, you're talking about hardened police officers that have seen everything under the sun, but the stuff that they saw on the Wiener laptop was so horrific that 2 or 3 of them committed suicide because they couldn't bear what they saw. So imagine the entire population. It's like, and this even makes what we saw at the end of World War II pale in comparison, because these are little kids, right? You saw bodies burned, you saw crematoriums, you saw the gas chambers, which now have been debunked, and you've seen all of that through our history books, and get away from what's real, what's not. So we know the cruelty exists in the human psyche. We know that the humans are capable of intense and immeasurable cruelty. But there are things that even we would consider completely outrageous that the public can never see. And I don't even know if you could tell the public about it to where they believe it. That's how bad and how deep this goes. And that's the stuff I saw. Look, I saw stuff that took me years to unwind in counseling. Like I couldn't put my head around. Like, why would you dismember a baby? Why would you do that? Like I still to this day, I can't I saw baby parts on a floor in this place. It was, first of all, it was disgustingly dirty, and baby parts. Like this kid was basically surgically cut up. Like, why would you do that to a kid? What what makes it okay in your head to do that to a child? Really, I want to know. I really want to know what people tell themselves that watch this stuff on the dark web and then pay money to direct what happens to a kid that they know is going to die. Like, how sadistic, how much of a sick fuck do you have to be to make that okay in your head? And then I want to know how many of those people are out there. I want to know exactly how many of those people were paying money to have a kid tortured to death. And then I want to see them tortured the same way that the kid was tortured. But how do you tell the public that? How do you disclose that to the public that they were dismembering kids in a chair for money? I mean, how do you disclose that? So it's one thing for us to look at it, but there's certain things we can never show the public because there's just too many snowflakes out there that would never be able to do anything with that information. So you're talking about a body of information that, simply put, I don't think can ever make it to the light of day, and that's going to be a very, very tough sell, especially now when people know it's out there.
Yeah.
So
and where it plays out, I want to take it back to the beginning, where you said that these laws have been passed in California, and I think you said Washington State. One of them were,
all the blue states.
Yeah,
they're making it out. They're legalizing grooming kids.
Yeah, which says something about how that political organization, the Democratic Party in particular, has been captured, especially when they had Joe Biden as president. You can see why, right? How that's been captured by pedophiles. Just to give you a contrast, Stephen, in the UK, there's the Children's Act, 1989 Children's Act. And I talked to a human rights lawyer about it a few years ago, and he said to me, not only is it, because I think it's a fabulous piece of legislation, the Tories, the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, and the Labour Party got together to work out, well, what can we do that's for the best for the children? So it wasn't driven by a party political agenda. Absolute fabulous, really great piece of legislation. This human rights lawyer said, I said to him, look, I think it's a great piece of legislation. He said it's actually considered not just the best in children's legislation, it's actually considered as one of the best, if not the best, statute of all in any sphere. And one of the things that happens in England, and I know this as a social worker, if I got a little kid, my son, to be collected from school, and I say to the school, I want Stephen to come and collect my kid, I have to tell the school, then I have to give the school a password that I've given you for you to collect the kid. And if you don't have that password, they won't give the kid over. They'll call social services, or they'll call, child protection services. In some cases, they'll even call the police. But the idea that anybody can just turn up.
Yeah. They're legalizing criminality. And they've lowered the age of consent. That was the first thing they did, right? That should have been, that discussion first happened in San Francisco and California, of course. That should have been the first red flag for parents in California. Like, they're lowering the age of consent. And they lowered the age of consent so that, pedophiles could go after kids, as young as 14. And I don't remember where it ended up, what age it ended up, what it was, age of consent moved from 18 down to like 15 or 14. And it was all done in pretense of doing this. They're slowly adding laws to the books now that allow pedophiles to escape prosecution. And more importantly, they allow schools and, places that are supposed to be responsible for children, gives them plausible deniability because the law says that they can do these things. But the fact that Washington State passed a law where your kid can be abused by a teacher and they don't have to report it to you, they don't have to report that your kid's on, hormone blockers or on, is being groomed to, do the trans surgery. I mean, that should have been a red flag to every parent. But it amazes me that parents are still in those states and they still think everything's fine. To be honest with you, what I anticipate coming next is somebody that's in the state will lose their kid Somebody will walk away with their kid from one of the schools, and they will go off the reservation and take it out of the school. When the real people that need to be held accountable are the lawmakers, which most of them are pedophiles. And that's where I see this going. At some point, this ends in blood. It's inevitable now.
Which then
because
becomes justification for further authoritarian measures.
that's fine. They can bring it all they want. It's going to fail,
Yeah.
right? I mean, let's face it. This control grid they're trying to put in place. How many kings throughout history have had their spies in the population? They've tried to maintain control. They've tried to maintain, authoritarian rule. What always happens to them? At some point, they get deposed. The only reason the dictators that are still out there, what would that be in North Korea? The only reason he's still in place is because he starved his population to the point where they can't rise up against him. We're not going to get that far. We're going to get to the place where somebody goes off the reservation and they either go after a politician or they go after a banker or they go after another CEO. We've already started to see it starting to trickle into it's going to trickle even more, and then it's going to turn into a stream where almost every day you're hearing about somebody getting smoked. And it's because people are starting to realize, one, they've been lied to by politicians. They've been poisoned by CEOs. They're being lied to about the COVID jabs by doctors. They're being lied to about the side effects. And they're starting to see that the population that's in DC are privately owned individuals that serve in public office but really report to oligarchs. People are starting to wake up to that. And you're only going to see more and more politicians getting smoked because people are starting to realize there's no relief, right? They're being taxed out of their homes. They're being priced out of the market. In fact, the younger generations are never going to own a home. And why is a guy like Larry Fink and BlackRock able to go and manipulate the market, buying single family homes, jacking up the price? And just same thing happened in 2008. In 2008, nobody was held accountable for the market crash, the predatory lending practice. Nobody went to jail. And people remember, my generation, we remember that because I know people that lost their entire livelihood. And it was because the bank did a loan that was predatory. And then what happened? The same banks came in, they took possession of those homes, they sat on them to artificially increase the price of the market by holding on to inventory that could have kept the market prices reasonable. No, they sat on it so they could inflate the market. And again, nobody held accountable. So we're at that tipping point and that culmination point where all we need is just one nudge. And there's so many angry people across the spectrum that this will be a wildfire. And that's where I see it going.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, build all the control systems you want, pass all the fucking legislation you want, do whatever you want to do. Because at some point, I'm going to be knocking on your door and I'm going to hang you for treason. And that's how this is going to end. And you can pass all the laws you want. Trump can deploy all the people he wants to DC. There's only 33,000 FBI officers. Good luck with that. There's 330 Americans and 150 million of them are really pissed off. How do you think that's going to go?
And how many are armed?
There's over 200 million that are armed.
And how many of them are veterans? Or security?
There's a couple of million. There's a couple of million.
That's enough. That's enough. I wish we had the Second Amendment and the First Amendment in the UK as well, right? And Stephen, I do want to say that there is all this mess and nastiness and vile stuff and horrible stuff and tyranny that's rolling out that's being done to us, right? But from my read, and from talking to people like you and Tom Luongo and EM and Alex Crane and the others, right? We're going to go through some sticky years, but on the other side of it, it's really good. This isn't going to. They are not going to. This is not good. Humanity will.
This whole nonsense about it's over. There's going to be 1,000 years of darkness. That's bullshit. It's going to suck for a few years. It's going to be bad for others. It's going to be really bad for others. But on the other side of this, humanity is going to be hard as nails. And they're not going to put up with any of this bullshit. Any of Nancy Pelosi's or any of the rest of the malfeasance like Chuck Schumer and all those shitbags, Lindsey Graham and all these warhawks. Those people will not be they will not be on the planet very long.
Yeah.
They'll open their mouth. They'll get smoked in a restaurant. Career over. Just go away. That's where humanity's going. And I think the other thing is, the other interesting thing that I'm seeing, and part of it's the algorithms and the the AI. I don't want to call it AI. It's really algorithms that's on social media. And like if you look at one article, your feed's flooded with articles that are similar. Where I see that going is I see social media becoming the town square. It already is the town square, but the population will realize this is the town square, and that we will take away the right of private companies to censor, to regulate speech, and to dictate what's hate speech and what's not hate speech. All that's going to come to a head too. It already is. You're already seeing that happen. And I don't know the alien card because I'm seeing a lot more stuff about aliens and the disclosure conversation. I don't know where that's going, and I really don't care, to be honest with you. Right? We already know that there's tech that's been suppressed from the public. Some of it I saw early in my career that will never, it's never going to make the light of day, but it was really, really high tech, 20, 30 years ago. Imagine where it's at now. It's probably miniaturized, probably fully operational. So I know there's tech out there that we're not talking about. And the first clue is out of the blue, NASA's going to build a nuclear reactor on the moon. Why? Why would you do that? Gee, I don't know. Do we already have a base up there? I mean, come on. It's just the stuff that they're releasing, the information they're talking about. Like, have you ever heard of thorium before last year? I'd heard about
Tom
thorium.
Luongo mentioned it. That's where I heard
Yeah,
it. Credit to
thorium.
him. Yeah.
Right? It's more stable than uranium. It lasts longer than uranium. Power's the same thing. And you could do basically a salt reactor with thorium.
More abundant.
More abundant. It's safer than radiation. Wonder why that's being released right now. I can't tell you why, but I think it's interesting that that's being released too. I mean, I knew about that years ago. I mean, I talked to scientists years ago in the nuke business, and they were talking about thorium then. Like, I don't know why we don't switch over to thorium now. Why are we using N reactors? They're highly toxic, and you got to do something with all the wastewater.
Yeah,
we could build salt reactors. We did it down in White Sands. And it'll power 5 cities for 150 years. What are we doing this for? And I'm like, wow. So tell me more. Anyway, I got a deep dive into it when I was a lieutenant, and ever since then, I've been watching the technological progress of not just our society, but other societies. And we stagnated in the 70s. I mean, think about it. What have we really, really put in place besides the iPhone that is super high tech? I mean, we went from piston engine airplanes to jet engines to rockets literally overnight, and we haven't done anything since then. Like, you're telling me that the modern Boeing airliner that's been around since the early 60s is still the most efficient way to travel? We can't build a supersonic or a hypersonic aircraft that would do the same thing in less time and do it safely? Really? We can't build, orbital stations where we can put people up there for decades, and we haven't solved the entropy problem that we have with the human body in space? Really? And now all of a sudden we're going to go to the moon and put a reactor on the moon after what, 50 years, 60 years? I mean, when was that done? The 60s? So it's been 60 years. And all of a sudden, hey, we're going back to the moon.
Yes. We should, Stephen, we're going to have to finish up, right? We should have to continue to pay attention to all these conversations, and we have to stay awake. We have to question. We most importantly, we have to unite across all sectors of society. We have to unite each other. We are not each other's enemies. The enemies are those that are our overlords that want to destroy our livelihoods and have us fighting each other like ants in a jar.
Stephen, do you want to let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. You can find me at the Path Forward on Substack. It's pathforward25 at substack.com. You can find me on Twitter under LTC_Stephen_MUR. And you can find me on Telegram under the Path Forward. And I do a show. I've been doing it once a week, but usually twice a week I do a show and I talk about, current events and the information war.
And I shall have those links in the description below. Stephen, absolutely great talking to you. Look forward to speaking to you again next month. And we'll see what life brings then, right? Please share this video far and wide. And love and honor all, including yourselves. It's Crypto Rich and Stephen Murray signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.